Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, really sorry for speaking late. And second of all, now what we can do here is that exactly where we and then, right? I could have just actually made a counter variable, right? Like this, counter is equal to zero, right? Now, instead of doing that, what we're going to do is that we're actually going to import from kivy.properties, import numeric property. Now the thing is, you might ask, why am I importing this? I can just literally make a simple variable and put it here. And every time the button is incremented and the button is clicked, I'm just going to do what? I am just going to increment the counter, and that's all. This is not how stuff works with frameworks. So this is not how stuff works with framework. If I was to go with this variable, then in the background, this is going to be incremented, but there will be no updates happening onto the screen. So if I want the updates onto the screen, to be automatic, what I can do is that I can rather do this. I would make a counter variable. Rather, let's make it here. I'll make a counter variable, and in here I would say numeric property, and inside of this I'm going to write zero, right? The reason being, now as I've passed zero in here, the moment I update this zero, the entire UI is going to be updated along with it. So there are quite a few changes which I've made. The first of them being is I converted this into a string because the label can only accept a string. So as and moreover, this counter variable is an integer, so obviously I would have to convert it into a string. Moreover, another thing which I've done is this counter variable was actually here, and I brought it up here, right? The reason being, actually, the thing is I can access this from even within the function as well. The only way would be I would have to write self dot counter, right? And this is just how we do it. And yeah, this is just how we do it. Okay. And inshallah ta'ala it will work. Look, bismillah. It's working, right? So look, but I would rather put it here just so that I can tell you a difference between something. Okay, so now look, if I was to put the function in here, sorry, if I was to put the counter variable inside the build function, and the moment I press the button, this function is run, right? And when the function is run, counter cannot be updated. Why? Because this counter variable or this function, this attribute of the class cannot access another variable from inside this function. It cannot access it, okay? So there are either two ways. I can either put this inside it, and in order for this function to be able to access the variable from this function, I can just say self dot counter, right? And what the self does is that the self just allows it to go to the class, and then through the class it will go to the function, and then you can easily access it, right? So I can either do it doing this, or the second way could be I can put it here, but still over here I would have to write self. I cannot just go for something like this, right? I cannot do this way. Look, it's just going to give me an error, through an error, right? Through an error. Or even if oops, I'm sorry. And even if I remove self from here, it's still again going to give me an error because this counter cannot be, you see, it cannot be accessed, right? Because it's outside, it's inside the class, but it's outside the build function. So we cannot really use it. And this is why it's necessary for us to write self. Now look, this one, that's working, right? Increment. I can increment it as many times as I want. So we can actually make the app better and we can add a decrement function as well. But then we would have to add two different buttons. And this button is something that we're going to call the increment button, and the next button we're going to call it the other button, right? So yes, this is what we're going to be doing. Now another thing here is and another thing is this, look. Now this counter label I wrote self with it. And the reason I wrote self is not so that it can be accessed within the same function because we would not really like to do this, right? Look, in order for me to be able to explain self, the best method would be, you know how and sometimes you make a variable outside a function, and then in order for you to be able to access it inside the function, you would have to say global, right? And then you say like variable, the name of the variable, right? Variable name. This is literally the same thing. Self is literally almost self for classes. This is just all it is, right? Another way for me to do this is I could have just placed the counter label outside, and then from here I would have to or I would have had to write self here, right? So this is just a way we're doing it. I can actually show you me doing that. Look, I can just remove this and I can just one copy this here, and there we go, paste it. And I don't really need self anymore, right? Because it's right above me. Now look, Bismillah. It's still working, right? So this is just how the self actually works. Alhamdulillah, that's me. So now we're just going to add, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to add self. There you go. Alhamdulillah. And the next thing that we're going to be doing here is that we're just going to do this entire thing. But this time I'm going to say increment button, right? And this is going to be a decrement button. And then we're just going to kind of change it a bit. And another thing, if we want now, look, you can see one thing here, Bismillah. This increment button, you see, the buttons are a bit too big. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Both of them say increment. This is one mistake. I'm sorry. I'm going to correct it right now. So, yes, this must say decrement. Bismillah. Now let's run it. Now look. So this increments the counter and this decrements the counter, right? So we have got ourselves a pretty good counter here. Now, look, both of these are a bit too big, right? So what I would rather like to do is like to, you see, decrease this a bit. And I would rather, like decrease the size of both of the buttons, make them a bit smaller. And I would rather like to make the counter button a bit more big, right? A bit bigger. So, and another thing which I would like to do here is bring this O here, right? Like instead of having two labels, I would just rather have one big label. This is what I'm trying to do. So, inshallah ta'ala. And you might have seen ChatGPT. I was just copying code of how do you make something bigger, especially a button. So, what I'm going to do here is that I'm just going to copy and paste the code here. And let's see if that works. Bismillah. There you go. And nope. Oh wait, they're actually working, but they're a bit too small. This is not how small I wanted them to be like, but okay. I would have to like, okay, so these are the kinds of things you can play around with a bit. And so I would rather end the video right here because we have already done quite the main stuff. The rest of the stuff that is you see like not for example, another feature that we can add here is saving this counter into a text file or saving this counter into a database and then fetching it back, right? And or another thing that we can do here is we can give the user a pop-up the moment they try to go below zero, right? So there are different features that we can add, and I would rather fix it back. This doesn't really sound good, and also messing up with how both of these look and all of these things. So you can mess around with this, and literally programming is something that you can only get from playing around, right? So the more you play around, the more you practice, the more you're just gonna learn more stuff. Like I didn't know about self. My object-oriented programming was literally baffled, right? It was like I found it pretty confusing in Python, especially because of self. And Alhamdulillah, through Kiwi, I understood it, right? I understood why are we using self. So, and what is the actual use of self? So yeah, you just got to play with things, play around, and you're gonna find yourself in a pretty comfortable spot. So initially, obviously, coding and programming different frameworks, these things are going to be something you're going to find uncomfortable. You're going to be uncomfortable with, but the more you practice, the more it's just going to get better and better, inshallah ta'ala. So inshallah ta'ala, I'll see you in the next tutorial or video. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.